Well, back again. We want to talk a little bit more about quantitative variables. Remember, quantitative variables, they are numbers you collect from individuals that have units. Pretty much how you want to think about it. There's two types of quantitative variables out there beyond what we've seen already. Discrete. Discrete variables have a finite or countable possible number of values. So things that are discrete are like how many marbles are you carrying, how many pets do you own, things where there's like just a fixed number of things that can happen. More or less, usually you're counting something. And then over here in the continuous side, the values correspond to an interval in the real line. Now we're thinking of measurements where the measurement is something like length, weight, temperature, or if you measured it accurately, it could correspond to any real number. It's not forced to be specific values. So not everything's forced to be integer values. If you ask somebody how old they are, they're going to say 27 years old. You might think that's discrete because you ask them a question, they're going to answer it in integer value, so it would be, but the actual variable in question probably is continuous. How old are you? If you measure it accurately in years based on your birth date and time, or you ask for how many minutes old are you, that's pretty much every possible number in a range, and that would be considered a continuous random variable. So continuous, I have counts there, but it's really continuous. Like that. And then we can see what happens as we parse out what kinds of variables you might be looking at. So this is categorical, can be nominal or ordinal names or names with order. We could use shortcut CN and CO, categorical nominal, categorical ordinal, to represent those. And in the quantitative side, we said interval. Interval is where it makes sense to subtract values. And ratio is where it makes sense to take ratios of values where there's a zero. Look at that ratio. That I is not very good. Where there's a legitimate or recognized 0 point that corresponds to nothing. So you're measuring something from 0 on out. That's ratio quantitative. Interval, maybe you have units, but the 0 point is arbitrary, like temperature, or you could be measuring from the ground floor of a building, something where the 0 point has been decided by humans. It's not because of the nature of the thing you're measuring. And then, once you know it's an interval, quantitative interval, it could be discrete or continuous, and quantitative ratios could be discrete or continuous. So I have QID, quantitative interval discrete, quantitative interval continuous, quantitative ratio discrete, quantitative ratio continuous. Okay, so that nails down 6 possible kinds of variables right here that we might run into. And now my challenge is to identify with these types of things you might measure which ones they are. Okay. So sometimes you have a little bit of flexibility. Here's hours slept last night. If you measured it accurately, it would be a continuous variable. But ordinarily you would say I slept 8 hours. So we'll call it discrete. Is it ratio or interval? Hours, 0 hours means something. It means no sleep. So it's ratio, discrete. Here it is. Quantitative ratio. So I'll put that here. Quantitative ratio discrete, like that. And then minutes slept last night. Okay, so now you want to measure it more accurately. And if you're looking at minutes, maybe you're looking at fractions of minutes. Well, so now we could say that it's continuous. Quantitative ratio continuous. But it's how you interpret it. So if you're thinking of the answer being anything in an interval as opposed to fixed possible values, then we can call it continuous. Mother maiden name. It's a name, so it's categorical. There's no order to names, so we'll call it nominal. Categorical name, okay. Family income. Well, it has a good 0 point, so quantitative ratio. And I guess it just depends how it's being reported. I think if you're reporting it down to the penny, then I would think that more like a continuous situation. If it's in thousands of dollars, then I think it's more like discrete. I'm going to put, for practical purposes, basically continuous. Okay, weight of dog. I don't know how you're weighing that dog, but I suppose if you put an accurate scale, which you might do if you go to the vet, then that would be quantitative, 0 has meaning, ratio, continuous. Average traffic speed. I suppose if you're using a radar gun or something like that and it gives you a very accurate answer, you can think of that. 0 have meaning here? 0 means you're not moving, so that makes sense. So 0 has meaning, it's going to be ratio, quantitative, ratio, continuous. Average August high temperature. Well, temperatures are interval variables, so quantitative interval average, probably if you're averaging a bunch of different temperatures together over the month of August, you imagine getting any possible answer as that, so that would be continuous. And then color of socks. I guess that's categorical. It's color, and there's no order to color, so nominal. I notice I don't have any of these. Categorical with order. What do you think we could put there? How about sweetness of the fruit that you happen to be eating? Sweetness of fruit. So you go to the store, you pull out a peach, and you take a bite, and you say, "Oh, your friend says, how sweet is that?" You go, "Not very," or "That's pretty sweet," or "It's not really ripe yet." So there you have some idea that sweetness has an order to it. There's more sweet and less sweet, so that makes it categorical and ordinal. Oh, I got to get the right colors here. Categorical, ordinal. Okay, I guess that's good enough. So we have covered all the ways of talking about variables, and I guess I'm going to see you next time. I'll go look and see how these are coming out. Have a great one.